Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm Christine Musselin. I'm the Vice President for Research at Sciences Po in Paris, administrator too. I have a question for Igor and one for Steve. The first one for Igor, you spoke about global excellence, and I agree with you that this process that you describe is a global one that you find in so many countries. You look at 3, but there are many more having this kind of policies for excellence. I think you didn't mention that, in fact, these processes are global in the fact that they are present in different countries, but in a way they are very nationalist. That's something I will say tomorrow. It's a kind of soft nationalism because they develop because each country wants to be first. And it's really much more about competition and national pride than about global processes. And I would like you to, do you agree with that or not? My question to Steve is very simple. First of all, I'm really looking forward reading the book, and I very much like the idea that tensions, contradictions are motors for performance in a way and for improvement. But my question is very simple. I don't understand the title of the book after your argument. So if you can explain it, that would be great. Thank you.
So Igor, go first, then Steve.
Yep. Thank you, Kirsten. And this is actually the point we're trying to make in the paper, that for example, in this discussion about world-class universities, that many universities actually read and try to rely or recommendation how to improve in rankings. There's nothing about the role of the state and how states are pushing this movement. And first of all, I agree with you that this reflects a strive for sort of a national pride and national competitiveness. But on the other hand, on the discussion how universities are doing that, we don't see any mentions of the state. And we're trying to show using the examples of national global excellence initiatives in 3 countries, but there could be more, of course, like Germany, like other countries as well, that doing the same thing. And we're trying to show that the template of world-class university considered to be unified in the literature is not that unified, and that there are differences in how universities are going in this path.
So I have already told the publisher that the title might have to change, but here's what I had in mind. It was not so much that knowledge is ending, although there are a few fields that are having trouble in the United States, like Romance languages, and it is also true that as we see online expanding, online is going in very practical directions, and so we have to worry that at least subfields in many of the humanities and social sciences, those conference attendance, which is so important for intellectual life, we could see some erosion there. And I think that's one of the things people don't think about when they think about online, but it is actually something, the vitality of intellectual life, I think, is related, potentially. But mostly I meant the purposes. The ends, meaning the purposes of knowledge, and the extent to which knowledge was being used to solve social problems and create new technologies and so on, and being directed towards certain fields because of donor interest and away from other fields. So it ends, you could just say, purposes of knowledge.
Jim.
I'd like to hop into your first question a little bit. We're the #1 university in the world in publications and citations in academic journals on the Arctic, research on the Arctic. And we take great pride in that. And I get to stand up and say it's not Berkeley, and it's not Harvard, and it's not MIT, it's us. So there's pride. I use that with the state government and asking for money, because we lever a lot of external money from that. But also, and most importantly, climate change is happening in Alaska much faster than it's happening right here. So there's real practical relevance to leading in the world in that particular field. We do not aspire to be world-class in the way that Manchester is or Berkeley is, but in a specific place, that relevance, I think, I just wanted to note that It's important.
Okay, I'd like to recognize Renato for the next question. The mic is arriving.
Thank you. Is for Jim? Okay, I was checking here the census data in the US. You have about 16% of natives, right? So the population, and only about 10% have, who are 25 or older, have or even lower than that, a degree. So do you have any affirmative action programs that are dedicated to the Alaskan natives, or is that not a major concern for the university?
It is a major concern for the university. We have to be legally compliant in the United States. It's a very contentious area of law, but we have got several things that I'll mention to you. One is we have 53 school districts in Alaska. Crazy, but we do. Some are very, very small. We give a scholarship, tuition scholarship, to the top 10% of every high school graduating class. And what that means is it is sort of a, if you will, a passive approach to getting a lot more Alaskan natives into the University of Alaska. That's one thing we do. A second thing is work very closely with the Alaska Native corporations. The axial form of organization of Alaskan Native people in Alaska since the passage of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act in 1971-72 was to set up for-profit Native-owned corporations. Some of these companies make $2–3 billion a year. And they have foundations for education purposes, so close collaboration with them. A third is really a tremendous program. It's called the Alaska Native Science and Engineering Program. You don't have to be Native to get into it, but they start at 7th grade. And they give a kid, they do cream the top, I will admit, but they go out to the smartest kids and they give them computers. They say, take it apart, now put it back together again. And then come onto the university campus every summer through high school. And so on average, those kids are graduating from high school with a year of college done. They require no developmental or remedial education, and they come to us. We graduated last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, the first Alaska Native engineering PhDs who were hired back in the engineering school. So that is a real, we're looking at 7th grade as our target, and to try to, and teacher education is another one where we're doing the same kind of thing in a third area, so engineering, science, STEM, education, because we think that if we can get rural teachers to be teachers, they'll stay instead of turning over every time. And then healthcare is the third important prong of outreach into the 7th grade target.
Okay, I have John next and then 2 questions.
Well, one comment that just briefly is, it is interesting how Alaska has certain traits of what you see in other parts of the world in terms of declining population, brain drain, and in an American context, but it's a really fascinating story. But my question is to Satoshi. So, you know, in your paper, you didn't really mention this, I don't believe, in what you just talked about. One of your major findings is that certain CSUs are becoming more UC-like in terms of their research portfolio, perhaps in some other ways. And that's a very, you know, we're really seeing a significant grouping of institutions that, therefore, there is, tell me if I'm wrong, there is greater differentiation within the CSU system, or it's changing in some way. So just curious as to your, you know, your thoughts on that, and also that wasn't as much you're finding in the CSU. I'm sorry, in the CUNY system, correct? So just some observations on that.
Well, UC system, all the 10 campuses. Of course, you know, Davis is strong in like agriculture, you know, fields and so on, and UCSF, of course, medical and health. So it seems like, you know, when I did the analysis, the missions of functions given to those campuses seem to be pretty much fixed for UC, right? So, but CSU, when I did the analysis, always the 2nd or 3rd tier universities are trying to become the top. So, like, you know, following their model. So they want to be good at, you know, research. They want to excel in teaching and, you know, visible in social service. So I think that's what I saw in the CUNY system too. And SUNY system, I think. I have to go back to my own paper because, like I said, I've been working on this paper for five years, and the bottom line is they all want to be, almighty universities, I think, because they want, especially in terms of the incentive in research. I think CSU is trying to gain more money for research, or it could be public service, but yeah.
The thing is, they're competitive for federal research dollars.
Like,
some of them are. I mean, there's obviously the high faculty and these kind of things. But if you look at the profile of San Diego State,
yeah.
It is a significant engineering and certain selected fields.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, we have 3 questioners in line. We have 10 minutes since we're going to violate by only 5 minutes on the clock. So I'm closed to more questions beyond the 3.
Okay.
First back here, yes. And we need the mic.
Okay, my name is Kirsten Song. I'm a visiting scholar of Graduate School of Education, UC Berkeley, and I'm an associate professor in Zhejiang University, mainland China, but I'm Korean. I was working in Shanghai ranking for several years. So when you talk about the Japan and China and Russia, and then when you talk about the global excellence, for me is really focusing on structure scope and relate to the ranking issues. But for the first time, one of the scholars talking about is really focused on national, for their nation, right? It is true, the Chinese Shanghai ranking is because of Chinese university wanted to be catch up American university. For instance, Harvard University. So my question is, what you think about through your article to emphasize or argument about global excellence? Do you need to be more focusing on soft power, more focusing on students' ability, more global competitiveness? So when you are talking about this article, I really want to read about it. So please let me know what is global excellence for our future, 21st century. And the second question is, I was really impressed about end of knowledge. That was really sarcastic. I still believe in American kind of research university. It's holding the knowledge. It's most thick and strong globally. But my question is, how the knowledge is breaking. It's not measured by inside of the knowledge breaking for me. From my perspective, this is measured by society. It's measured by outside of the university. That make university threaten. This is what I thought about at the beginning about when you talk about. So what do you think about the future of, also the similar question, what is the future of American education can be more globally competitive and keep leading that position? So that is my question. Thank you.
You want to go
Take it.
first?
It's a great question. And again, as I was saying, we're trying to show and demonstrate you the cases of these 3 countries that there is no global excellence. That even what they call global excellence is in fact a nationally sort of a vectored definition that they try to put in the so-called Global Excellence Initiative to be successful globally. But in most of the countries, it means a certain national definition of this excellence. And I can tell you the example of Russia, and Satoshi, you can comment on Japanese case. In Russia, one of the definitions, I took the interviews with the government officials, with university administrators, and with faculty. And one of the definitions of global excellent, being a global excellent, that is sort of imprinted in the program, in 5100 program, is to be capable of radical change. And it's not what you find, for example, in Chinese case or in Japanese case. The university that is sort of portrayed as an ideal one for the group of universities, for group of Russian universities that are going to be to advance in global rankings, you cannot imagine what university it is. It's Arizona State University. not because it's position in rankings, but because of the the ability to change quickly and transform quickly, and that's what they put in the nationally oriented definition of the global excellence. But yes, we're trying to show that there is no global definition. And
well, simply,
Satoshi.
correct me if I'm wrong. There are some Japanese professors here, but in Japan, like global excellence or excellence initiative, and like becoming one of the top 100 universities in ranking, they're used sort of interchangeably. So there's no clear. I think the Ministry of Education would not give us a clear definition of what global excellence requires. So I think we're like, groping around in the darkness, and what would be the how can we define this excellence? But and it's true that there are many Japanese universities who are saying, well, ranking is not everything, so we're gonna have to find our own niche and the strength. We've been strong in this field, so it doesn't matter if we're going to be ranked among the top 100 or not. But so we're trying to find some, that could be the definition of excellence, for individual universities.
Steve,
yeah. So one of the ways that that American universities have succeeded is because even though the growth of the faculty is not flat, but the tenured faculty is going up very slowly, is there are enormous armies of postdocs and graduate students, and the number of people who are working on projects has grown over time, and so the productivity of these scientific teams has grown in the same way. You can publish more if you have a big team, and we have to feel bad for many of the postdocs because there is now even a term called permadoc, which is you're beyond 5 years, and without a clear sense of what's going to happen next. And the other thing is that the reason I don't think that entrepreneurial science is a tremendous threat to basic science or to publication or citations is because even teams that have use-inspired research, that they want to have a practical effect, they want to publish, and they have to publish in order to know whether they're right or not, to get feedback from colleagues. And so one of the cases in the 50 inventions is HIV protease inhibitors. There were 3 teams working on it, and they all published because they all wanted to, and they commented on each other's work, and it was through that commenting that they actually got the issue right. So, and then I would say finally that just the creativity is the bottom line. And to have creativity, you need a very robust intellectual culture and very high standards. And we have seen, another probe that I did for the book, just briefly, is I looked at the top cited books and articles in social science. And we often think, well, the social sciences and the humanities have dropped off because of a tremendous rise. And to some degree, that's true in science and engineering. But there's still a tremendous amount of creativity. Just if you look at concepts that were developed during this period: social capital, stakeholders, emotional intelligence, self-efficacy, transaction cost economics. There are a whole bunch of things that have transformed our way of looking at the world that reflect the creativity of the American university system, which is built on standards and numbers of people working in these invisible colleges in many subfields. And I think as long as that persists, we're probably in pretty decent shape. To the extent that erodes, then there are problems.
Okay, I'd ask for economy of words and questions now from here on. And we have one where the microphone is arriving, please, and then Bill Lacey will be the last.
Okay. I'm Susanna Lohman from UCLA, and my question is to Stephen and James. So, Stephen, you said that Trump is a blip, but I'd like to suggest that perhaps universities have contributed to that blip, and unless we come to grips with that, the blip might continue, right? And so if you look at the new divide in American politics, let me just read to it. It's like rural versus urban, it's educated, uneducated, religious, secular, old, young, white, minority, and so forth. And it's obvious that the universities are always on one side of these various divides, right? And so you could think of this as the revolt of the people who have been left behind from the system that's been created by the universities, right? And this brings me to James, that if one had to sort of step back and say, what kind of university system could solve this problem, these kinds of divides, then, you know, if it didn't exist, one would really have to invent the land grants, you know, because they could really grapple with these problems. And so the fact that the land grants already exist, and nonetheless we have these problems, suggests that maybe the land grants have been really failing the United States in a very deep way. And so perhaps you could comment on that.
So I'll start. That's a great question, and it's something I do deal with in the book at least a little bit. For the first time over the last 2 years, Republicans have said universities do more harm than good. And so there's a huge problem there. And one thing that I strongly advocate is that we start to include low-income students of all races, including whites, in our idea of what's social inclusion. And that we move from affirmative action based on race to a broader and more inclusive form of of affirmative action, because we do need to bring people who now feel very alienated from the culture of universities into a closer connection. And that's one way to do it.
Okay, Jim, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, and I'll be brief here. You know, I suppose, you know, this is a land-grant university, and it's an elite university, and you have to be in the top, 12% of your high school graduating class if you're, to get in. And I don't know what tuition is, but fees are something like $13,000 or $14,000 a year, ballpark, something like that. We are a land-grant university. We are open admission. And yet we have, you know, PhD granting status. Now, that's a unique aspect of being, you know, in this relative 730,000 people in our entire state, unlike California, which has a massive population. So we get to, that's one of the reasons I stay in Alaska. People ask me all the time why I stay there, because we can actually do things pretty quickly. We have the opportunity to do things there because we are relatively small and not quite as rigid. One of the concerns I have in this discussion here too is, you know, you talk about some of these really entrepreneurial institutions. ASU is a good example. They are expanding dramatically in online education and taking that revenue and investing in global initiatives. So there's a real question, and I wish Michael Crow were here to answer the question. Yes. How are you doing in serving Arizona's needs for higher education? So, thank you. Good question.
Okay, so we have one last question from Bill Lacey.
I'm Bill Lacey. I'm a sociologist, fellow sociologist, and chair of the Human Ecology Department at UC Davis. So I do have a question for my fellow sociologist. You alluded to issues of the perma-doctoral students. You also talked about the adjunct professors. We have an increasing number of part-time instructors, contract instructors. Right now in my department, I have more part-time instructors than I have tenured faculty. I wonder, have you tracked that and looked at what the consequences might be of that?
Yes, and there's an excellent book by Finkelstein, Schuster, and Conley that has all the data about this. And we now see that part-time instructors are almost 50% of the instructional labor force. Pay is very low. Often they don't have benefits. And so it's a big problem. There are a few things that could be done, but you know, the universities are reflecting what's happening in the larger economy to a significant degree, and in many ways that's true. But We could make funds available for travel and research without, that wouldn't cost too much. We can try to bring these people into the family, make sure that they attend lectures and so forth. We should have, as part of accountability, universities should be publishing how many part-time instructors they have. They should not be in doing the introductory courses. Overall, the data is very clear that part-time instructors, because they're spread out so thin and they're paid so poorly, they are not as strong as teachers, even as the full-time faculty. And yet we put them in these key courses where if students don't get a good education, they're turned off to the entire field. And so we need to be, a lot more thought has to be given to this. It's been something that the universities, in my opinion, have ducked and just let happen, and it's time for that to end.
Okay, with that, I'm going to thank our panel, and we are ready for lunch.
Thank you.